Tonight, there have been tales of werewolves and dog-headed men since the ancient Greeks, with some of the origins being traced back to the Navajo legends of skinwalkers. This researcher believes that they are real, and that they may be the direct result of genetic tampering. For this episode of Ropen Research, we dive deep into the legend of the Dogman, a North American cryptid that has haunted the folklore of Michigan and beyond. Described as a towering bipedal creature, the body of a man and the head of a canine. Its eerie howl is said to echo the screams of human beings, both terrifying and unnatural. But despite what you may have heard in the mainstream media, the origins of these creatures don't begin in the late 1980s. In fact, the Dogman's lineage can be traced further back into the ancient world and even within the pages of forbidden biblical texts. This evening, we aim to uncover the dark origins of these werewolf-like creatures, exposing truths long buried in shadow, with help from our guest Lance Hightower, founder of Monster 911, and author Jeremy Aldenay. Their perspective will provide a fresh look at the bipedal monsters from a biblical perspective. Could these creatures be more than myth? Are they part of an ancient bloodline tied to a fallen race? Join us. Perhaps you too will believe.
There's a good chance we're dealing with an organic creature or we're dealing with a supernatural entity.
Pterosaurs, according to evolution, have been extinct for 70 million years or so.
Our objective to research information that describes the truth about the entire cosmos.
And the name of the business is SJ Polygraph, which is directly behind me, where the examination will be taking place.
There's very good evidence that is indicating that they still are alive.
It was a warm summer evening in June, around 7:30 p.m. "50-year-old truck driver Joe Barger pulled his rig off a rural two-lane highway in central Michigan. He had been hauling a load of 4,300 pounds, and after hearing strange sounds from the brakes, he realized he needed to stop. The highway was desolate, no good places to pull over, but he found a small national forest stop about 10 miles from the nearest town.
Coast to Coast AM, and tonight, Sasquatch. My guest tonight is a friend. He has been researching Bigfoot for a long time. Mike Patterson of Sasquatch, Ontario. You can find him at SasquatchOntario.com. Welcome back again, Mike.
Hey, Connie, thanks for having me on. When it comes to the audio, I just want to say, I record every visit all night long. Yeah, you end up capturing whatever happens and basically outdoors throughout the night. It's a very well-developed situation that I was invited into by a property owner way back in 2012, so it's been ongoing.
The forest was quiet as he stepped out of the truck to inspect the brakes, the air thick with the smell of pine and dust. Something caught his attention from the nearby woodline. He froze. Something was moving out there. Elk, maybe? He'd seen his fair share of wildlife in the area, and the sound didn't seem too unusual. Being an elk hunter, excitement got the best of him. Joe was curious as he investigated. If it was an elk, he was determined to see it. Not more than 50 yards into the tree line, Joe saw a very large animal wedged between two trees. Just then, Joe's excitement turned to terror. It was a wolf. A large one, but there was something horribly wrong. Joe ran back to the truck with haste, hoping to be undetected. The hill ahead was steep, and his semi struggled to climb it at a slow pace, 20 to 25 miles per hour. With the windows down, the warm evening air filled the cabin. No traffic, just the hum of the engine and the sound of his tires on the road. Then, he saw it. A massive wolf's head appeared just outside the window. Red eyes locked onto him. It was pacing the truck, staying just out of reach. 4 or 5 feet from the mirror, the creature was too tall, way too tall to be a wolf. His heart skipped a beat. The creature stood 9 feet. It was now apparent to Joe that this was no animal, but the stuff of nightmares. Joe's mind struggled to make sense of what he was seeing. It was jet black, its fur seemingly shimmering with a grayish tint under the fading sunlight. It was the size of a horse on 2 legs, its body unnaturally massive, built for power. But its head was something else entirely. It resembled a wolf, yes, but far larger and more grotesque, with pointed Doberman ears. The thing's tongue, the size of a cow's tongue, hung out of its mouth as it kept pace with the truck. This thing's too big to be a wolf. His instinct screamed, it's not a wolf. For a few seconds, Joe was paralyzed. He couldn't think, couldn't breathe. He realized that his training wasn't just muscle memory. It was survival instinct. Fight or flight. This thing is going to kill me. Joe wasn't about to let it. In a flash of instinct, he pulled the pistol from his holster. His hand shook as he took aim. The creature was still pacing, barely a foot away from the truck's side. He didn't hesitate. A shot rang out, loud enough to echo through the forest. The bullet hit the creature square in the temple, where the eye should have been. Joe didn't stop. He was still moving slow up the hill, the truck straining, still processing the horror he'd just faced. What was that thing? Why was it there? As he pulled away, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, waiting in the dark woods, watching.
Last year, our network featured an interview with Dave Wetzel, where he discussed his latest efforts in Africa to search for the elusive Mokele-Mbembe, also known as the Mokele-Mbembe in the Congolese. In 2024, Dave embarked on a trek deep into the Cameroon. However, his expedition faced significant challenges. Challenges that resulted in valuable time lost in the field. Dave has since declined a follow-up interview regarding the expedition, and we deeply sympathize with the obstacles they encountered, as well as the numerous contributions made throughout this journey. To learn more about this expedition, be sure to check out the latest video on Josiah Moore's YouTube channel entitled Bellfields. We would like to extend our sincere thanks to both researchers for their enduring contributions to this field of study.
The RRN Ropen Radio Network is brought to you by 511 Tactical. Always be ready. By Creation Evidence Museum of Texas. God's Word in 6 days. And by the Wildlife Safari, America's top cheetah breeding program. You are closer to Africa than you think.
Next, an investigative perspective on the Dogman phenomena. A one-on-one with Monster 911's Lance Hightower. Tell me more about this profession, this medicine profession that you're involved in, if you will.
Yeah, sure. Well, like many chiropractors that get involved, or people in medicine or healthcare, no matter what it is, nursing, surgery, whatever, everybody has a good experience. I was living in Weatherford, Oklahoma at the time, and I was working for a company and had injured myself. And someone said, go see a chiropractor. And I said, what do they do? And I went, had a great experience. And I just said, wow, this is something that I just felt led to do. And so from there, I met my wife in that town and we moved up north and I applied to the school and I got in that summer of 1994. And so then came back to Weatherford, Oklahoma, practiced there for about 10 years and then sold the practice and moved to Tulsa and started brand new again. And then I decided to do something different and built a mobile practice where I went to individuals at their home and businesses. And I did that for about 5 years and then I retired.
Oh, okay. So you are retired now.
I'm officially retired, but I still see friends and family at my house here, or if people need me, I've got a table in my front room and things like that. So yeah, I'll consult with a few docs every once in a while here and there. But for the most part, this is what I do full time now with the podcast show.
Okay. Well, it's very interesting. I found you online and I saw some of the mobile vehicle which you have. And I saw the neat video of you explaining your profession and what you do to help others cope with their issues. So pretty impressive. I like it.
Well, thank you. And it does bleed into a little bit, I felt, and that was kind of by an accident. When I started doing a lot of the podcast shows, it was just for sharing. And then that kind of led into something and I felt led to help people, which I still feel I'm helping people. So it just kind of migrated into something different.
I'll say it has. It really has. So now it comes to the point I would like to make. Being that you are a man of medicine, this is your profession, you had a long career in that, 27 years, that's really good. Now it comes to this. And I'm sure you've heard this many times from other people who were suddenly come to hear about it. Why this field? What drove you to want to be a part of this? As a lot of others who have shared of our experiences of what drove us to it. I'm a person who's been involved in politics. Why this of all things did I get involved? But for you, you and I have chatted about this before, but for those who are new to this network, our network is growing, so I want them to hear it as well. What brought you to this field?
Well, it would seem just polar opposites when someone finds out I've been in healthcare. I had a real clinic. I had real staff. I saw thousands and thousands of patients over the years, and I did a little bit of everything in my practice. So, just completely opposite, you think. But really for me, it's my brothers and I, we grew up very rural in eastern Oklahoma, western Oklahoma. Our dad was in the state parks. And so we always had the benefit. At the time, we didn't understand it or realize it or just recognize this huge opportunity we had always living in the country, always being in a state park where we could fish, hunt, hike, bike. We could do it all. And it was really a blessing. But we just, when you're around it all the time, that's all your reference is. And so you don't realize how much of a huge opportunity it was. So we grew up very rural and we grew up in the country. We camped outdoors all the time. And so, like many of us do, you always have a yearning to go back to somewhat of your childhood. So fast forward, we always had interesting things happen to us that we just kind of wrote it off as happenstance. That was odd, and then we'd forget about it and go on. I had an event happen when I was about 7 in eastern Oklahoma. I did see a figure standing at the edge of the woods. I told my parents, and like most parents, oh, you just saw a bear. It wasn't nothing. And then I had something happen near the window that night or the following night, and it really shook me up. And again, I told my parents, and they were like, you didn't really hear anything. So you kind of move on. You do forget about it as a child. And then fast forward, we had a lot of things happen at deer camp. We're hunters. And then in 2013, oh, excuse me, in 1995, my brother Lane had a close encounter with a friend of his just west of our hometown of Watonga, Oklahoma. And it took him 2 years to tell me, but he told my parents and I and another brother at the time. We were sitting around a dinner table, and that really brought forth a lot of memories that I had had as a kid and things that had happened. It's almost like it just collectively, like a fire hose, went to the brain and said, wait a
Yeah,
minute, there's something here.
I bet.
And it was a close encounter he had. It was a very frightening encounter. And so I have since, of course, had him tell me the encounter story a million times. And I think it was about in when I was going to chiropractic school at the time. My brother said, "You got to listen to these things called podcast." I said, "What's a podcast?" And it was kind of funny. He said, "Well, you got to go to YouTube." And I said, "Oh yeah, I've heard of that." And I said, "Well, why don't we share some of our stories on there?" And I didn't know anything about how to do a podcast show. I barely could operate my phone. I had no courses. I had no courses in computers. I mean, I barely knew how to fully operate. The phones were just coming around at that time. I
Yeah.
think it was the BlackBerry or something, and I was used
Mm.
to a pager.
Yeah.
So I taught myself YouTube wise on YouTube University, and I did it with a broken phone that had a speaker that was broken and a $40 Bluetooth speaker, and that's how I
Yeah.
started our first show. And I kind of copied that I thought was some good shows, and I blended this show, that show, and then we came up with Cryptid Brothers Investigations of Oklahoma, January
That's right. Yeah.
2017. And it exploded after that. I didn't plan on it, which was really kind of crazy. It overloaded us. I had a toll-free number. I still have the toll-free number to this day. When I really got into it, I felt these people need help. These people, they're they're really having some anxiety and some very stressful
Exactly.
moments, and I could recognize some of the same similarities that I would have with people in pain. Because when you're in pain, if you go to the nth stage of it, people instantly go, how am I going to work? How am I going to support my family? How am I going to tell my boss? How am I going to drive? How am I going to get out of my car? And so I'm starting to see some similarities in this anxiety at a psychological level. And I thought, well, maybe I could help some of these people help understand.
I've listened to a lot of your shows, Lance, and you're one of the very few that I do recommend because not only do you have a heart for this and a great understanding of it, and because of something you've seen, kind of like myself as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's also a biblical side that you apply because I do believe you're a Christian man.
I am.
Who, and there's a lot of people out there who are not, especially in this field. You would think with a great field like this, you're bound to have a lot more believers. Not necessarily. It doesn't always go that way. Exactly. So I think that's what does separate you from everyone else. You do have a good, sincere heart that you do care about every one of your eyewitnesses who come forward and said, hey, it doesn't just end here. You're free to talk to me again if you so choose to. So that's why I love recommending your show.
Well, I appreciate that. And, you hit on an extremely, extremely important point here. At least I think so. And I think that's in that I always like to say sharing is good medicine for the soul. And always remember that you're dealing with a human being that had a real experience and they're really opening up a part of their lives to you. And I realize people could listen to these shows for sheer entertainment. I get it. And
Yeah.
to each their own, and that's fine. But the way I look at it more than that. I'm looking at that I'm really trying to process what happened for them and that it was scary. Not always is it a scary event, but that, it's all relative depending on the person when they see what they see at that moment and the life experiences they've had up to that point.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more involved, but I always say, always remember, guys, you're talking to a person that has real feelings. They're just trying to make it in the world. They're trying to pay their bills and go to work and raise a family,
Mm-hmm.
etc. So at least be have some courtesy when it comes to making a comment, or really understanding that this is a real person like you and I that had experienced something that they didn't plan on happening.
Before I get to the next question, do you stay within Oklahoma or you travel outside of it when you hear about testimonies and you do investigations?
Yeah, I travel outside of Oklahoma as well. And I restarted the show up. I had some health issues for about a year, better. And I had time to really contemplate the show, a new direction, what would be more interesting to me and engaging would be more sit down interviews with the eyewitness. So that's
Agreed.
kind of what
Yeah.
I'm pursuing now, as well as the exact location. So even if if they had a sighting in Michigan and they're now in Texas, my goal is to go to where they're at. I don't expect them to come to me, and then I will travel to the location site and shoot there too. So
Okay.
I want to union their sighting with the location. And that's kind of what I'm pursuing now. So like
I like it.
many people will say, "Well, Lance, where do I go? Where are the best places?" And it's kind of like sometimes figuratively, but literally look in your backyard.
Mhm.
My brother Lane always says if people only knew what was going bump in the night, they wouldn't, go outside and dump the garbage. They wouldn't go outside and relax on the front porch. And so that's kind of way I'm pursuing it now.
Well, it's good. I like it. I love see, it's interesting when we think about this field more, what we can brainstorm on, how we can get more creative, more inventive. I like that personal touch. I like going to people. And last year we had a great event where a woman came down from Astoria, Oregon to meet with us to do a polygraph examination because she had seen one of the largest pterosaurs I've ever heard of that was still out there near Point Defiance. And it was enough to terrify her, but she said, I need to tell people because they need to know what's happening out there. They need to know what's happening in our world. And it was a really, really great experience. But like you, it was a good step forward to change things up, to make things more personal, I think.
Absolutely.
For not just her sake, but for others too.
Yeah. And, just speaking of that, I had an opportunity, YouTube and this social media platform is just amazing. Who would have thought how
It
you could
is.
reach across the world? But um, back in 2019, Film Network reached out and said, "Hey, we saw your show," and I connected really well. We kind of verbally connected, great. And long story short, they were shooting a new show in Alaska, and I had the opportunity to film there. But what was interesting is a lot of people, the indigenous people there, spoke of these creatures like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Very,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was just like matter of fact. There was no hesitation.
Yep. It's
So,
true. Yeah. And what better people to hear from than from the natives as well?
oh my
They
goodness,
can tell you
yes,
so much. Yeah.
absolutely.
Lance, here we come to the punchline. What is a dogman? I know that seems like such a strange thing to say. I'm familiar with this, but I want the audience to understand from your perspective what this thing really is. What's your personal feeling after all the research, all the investigations? What does it lead to?
Well, the best way to describe it, and I'll use some of the words that my buddy Wiley Dave, who had a very relatively close experience with one, it was still out about 400 yards, but when you have a scoped rifle, it's like sitting as close as I am to my laptop right now. You can see all the details. And the best way to describe it, it is a canine creature that would be equivalent of our modern day werewolf. And I know just what you just said. It's almost very surreal that we're having
Yeah.
this discussion. It sounds something very fictional, very Hollywood, some type of something out of Van Helsing, like, surely not. But I wish it wasn't, but it is. It's not, it is a physical creature. It's not mystical. It is, so it looks like a werewolf in the sense of this. It has it's like if you take a regular domesticated dog and you make it say you take a 100-pound domesticated dog like a German Shepherd, and you make it 3 to 4 times larger, maybe 5 times larger. So now you're talking something 300 to 500 pounds.
Yeah.
Now you put Doberman pincher ears, but the ears extend about 8 to 10 inches in height. They're pointed. It has an over-exaggerated long snout. Its eyes are typically larger than domesticated German Shepherd. They're larger by twice. The shoulders, the chest, the arms are not that of a typical canine. They're that of like a man, hence the name Dogman. There's features that have physical or morphological features like a man that's a bodybuilder. The shoulders, I just got through doing an interview yesterday, and it's very reminiscent of what this eyewitness said. He was very close to the road with it. He said outside shoulder to outside shoulder was about 3.5 to 4 feet wide. It had a chest like a man, had arms, biceps, and triceps. He could see the sunlight coming through its hair, and he could see the ripple of muscle. It has a small waist, over-exaggerated muscular thighs.
Yeah.
It has canine features like a dog hawk, the reverse leg, and has a huge tail. And my buddy Wiley, he describes it, and I've asked him so many times, tell me again what you saw. He said, well, at that time, the only werewolf type movie that was out was Van Helsing. He said, take that movie, take one of those werewolves that you see, make it black, and make it with yellow eyes, and that's what I saw exactly.
Oh my God, jeez.
And he saw it, the one he saw, it had he said the size of the tongue was like a cow. It was huge. And it was blue, like a chow. And it was salivating off the gums. He could see the ears twitching, trying to find the sound because he was calling. He said the eyes were as amber as just this brilliant yellow, like a Pilsner beer. It was just a brilliant yellow. It was black, and it was just built like it had been going to a gym. But it is a physical canine creature. Now, the next question is, where did it come from? Which that's always in big debate in certain circles on podcast shows.
It is, yes, it is.
So our premise, this is just our belief. I can't prove, but then again, can't disprove what I'm going to say. I think this creature, it almost seems like it was manufactured.
Yeah.
That it's like if you put a dog on if you took a predator and mixed it with the largest Arctic wolf and put it on steroids, that's what you've got. The scary part of that name Dogman also not only refers to the physicality of how it looks, but the thinking ability that it has. There's been numerous people say that it was able to grasp and open up a window, a door, a trunk.
Right.
And how it was able to know. I just did an interview a couple weeks ago of a guy that saw one near the road, and he said, what kind of canine can stand still like a tree, not move its body, and all you see is it's moving its eyes as you pass with your car? I don't know of any that do that. Most predators will bolt. So this has a level of intelligence we don't understand. It's scary based on, again, numerous reports, based on firsthand accounts. And it just has a way to not outthink you, but it has a way to remove away from you, and how it, again, so many firsthand encounters, it's almost scary to know when you hear what these people are saying it did. That's the second aspect of this Dogman creature. So that's kind of, I know I didn't collectively narrow it down to 3 or 4 words what it is, but it is a real being that is a canine. And if you were going to have a modern day werewolf, this is it.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I think you touched on something too that I am going to discuss a little bit later on. you believe they're being created.
Yes.
This could be, okay. I feel the same way. I think that's just part of the iceberg of what's going on.
I do too.
I do think there are some more darker themes here that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost seems as if these creatures are not able to be killed with just regular weapons, although there are some accounts where, yes, you can take them out. But a lot of people, especially military officers, have said they can't kill it with a normal gun. That there's certain, now, this is a theory, but coming from people who have served, I find it more credible.
Oh,
Who
yes.
witness these things firsthand. So because of that, and I've had family members who have served in the military, and they've even passed down a story to me that they've witnessed a man transforming into something like this. This is stuff of nightmares, which you would think is outlandish and ridiculous if you're coming into this field and just learning all these things. But sorcery is very real.
Mm-hmm.
Demonology is very real.
It is.
And this is why we're warned to stay away from this stuff. But we're also told to expose the darkness, as Ephesians would tell us.
Right.
So I think, yeah, I do. I believe there's some truths there too. But because of all that you've learned over the years about this particular monster, make no mistake, this is a monster of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
Has it made you've heard the theories and everything that could be related to them. I'm sure you've probably gone to conferences as well.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people starting to get involved in the Dogman phenomena.
Yes.
Has it led you to pursue archaeological information that could pertain to this thing?
That is probably the next thing that I'm looking at, I guess you could say. I never tire in hearing an encounter that someone had with one of these creatures, because I always feel that the next eyewitness is going to reveal something a bit more that I didn't know it was capable of doing.
There's always something else.
There's always something else. And I'm fascinated, not only from an archaeological standpoint, but what I'm still interested more in the physical components, because I've heard the same thing when someone says they shoot it and it doesn't go down. Now I'm starting to think anatomical. Are the lungs, as we deem lungs, do they have the lobes where they're supposed to be? Does it have one heart, two hearts? Why didn't it go down? There wasn't any vitals to take it. Well, how is its brainstem organized? Maybe down the road, for me, I'm so wrapped up in the encounter issue and trying to learn the context of when someone saw something but I am looking into more of it. I've thought about this a lot. So yeah, I am interested. I'm interested to see how do these creatures, it's kind of like Sasquatch. They were in Oklahoma, They went by boogers years ago. And then they went by whatever they did. If they stole a lot of chickens, they would call it the Chicken Man of El Reno, Oklahoma, or whatever. So it wasn't until about, was it 1960s, maybe 50s, 60s, when they came up with Bigfoot. And then, but before that, in Oklahoma, eastern Oklahoma at least, they called them boogers. Well, did they call these Dogman creatures something else? And they were around in different parts of the country. That's what I'd like to kind of get into next, and and start shooting shows based on that.
Yeah, I hear you. And it's a lot of people believe that this Dogman thing started in 1987. That's not true. That's just one of the stories of the accounts that may have been debunked, which is the Beast of Bray Road. Everybody likes to refer to that. And I say, if you go back and you look at the ancient writings, and you look at text, you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, it actually points you towards these beings that have been here for a long time, or being conjured. They're being summoned. They're genetic altering, things like that just come into all of this, which I know is a lot to take in. But you have symbolism today that represents what was in the past, such as you have the Anubis from Egypt, which is part man, part jackal or wolf of some sort. You have the wasp scepter that represents the head of a pteranodon. So a lot of these things do go back to ancient times and archaeological discoveries. You mentioned energy, Lance. Usually, I'm not going to say that if you are a Christian, you're the only one who's going to pick up on these things. I think anybody could actually pick up on it. The presence of something that's powerful and evil.
Yes.
When we mention a creature like this, the Dogman, does it 9 times out of 10 represent that to any individual who's seen it? Do you get a vibe of doom, of gloom, evil?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'll put it this way. I have yet to do an interview, and I've done many on this Dogman creature. I have yet to do an interview that someone said, "Oh, it was an okay experience. I saw it." And every time, whether they're in a car, they're secure in a home, no matter what, and they have a gun in many cases. I have most all of them say, I felt this feeling of doom, that it was piercing my soul. It was looking to my soul, that I could see it thinking. And it wasn't good.
Yeah.
And I have yet to do an interview that someone said, "Oh, it was an okay experience." No, they've all said at this point, "I wish I'd never saw it." And they have and shortly after they say it, shortly right after they say, I think different now going out in the woods. Now that I know this thing's out there, I don't hunt anymore by myself. I don't go down to the river by myself. I always have someone with me, and I'll go in the day. As soon as that sun starts setting, I'm out of there. So it changes their life.
Just a little bit on zoology here. A wolf's range is quite significant. Wolf packs usually hunt within a specific territory, as large as 50 square miles, but they may even extend up to 1,000 square miles in areas where there is prey or prey is scarce. It makes me wonder about this thing then too.
Mm-hmm.
If it is being genetically created somewhere, or if it is an ultra-terrestrial being, John Keel theory, what would its range be? If a wolf has such a significant range, something to think about, I think.
No, absolutely. Well, you're talking something that could be 3 times larger, 4 times larger than a wolf, and therefore stronger, and therefore it makes sense faster. So the range could extend much, much larger than a typical indigenous American wolf or Canadian wolf or, say, Arctic wolf. Here's another wrench to throw in this just a little bit. In having the privilege to be able to interview as many people as I have firsthand accounts, one thing started also becoming a pattern. And this is one of my passions too, to help people understand and connect the dots. There became a group, for lack of a better word, I hate to use the word agency, of people that would soon knock on the doors or meet these eyewitnesses in a parking lot, usually by themselves. And they would do it in such a way that it was usually isolating the eyewitness to everyday activities, but they were by themselves. And they would never identify themselves. They would always dress somewhat the same. It was usually 2 people, always. There was either 2 males or a male and female, but never 2 females. My questioning in interviews now is, did you notice or have you noticed anything unusual where you would have blacked out windows, cars, the same car, maybe 3 or 4 of them, or a car parked down the street you didn't quite understand, or it was backed in rather than just pulled in like normal, how we normally park?
Yeah, good point.
Drones that are oversized, that are very expensive drones that your average individual typically can't afford, or helicopters, big one here, helicopters that are flying at night with no lights. And you would be surprised when I ask that question now, how they go, yeah, why? And so I help them connect some dots where they either will say, yes, someone did talk to me. I couldn't figure out what they wanted. And so I told them to leave. So I've helped people in that regard help connect dots. And these people aren't your friend, but I will say this. Any time that I've noticed there is a Dogman sighting, it is extremely high importance to them. Even if it's a sighting, there was no injury, there was no damage of equipment, it's just a sighting. These people are Johnny on the spot immediately within the week. Sasquatch, not so much, But if there was damage to property, an individual, or a Sasquatch got injured, whatever, yes, there probably will show up. But for these dogman creatures, it's an extremely high importance, just the sighting alone. And I've noticed that time and time and time again.
Yeah, I would think so. It's something more abnormal because it would almost seem like maybe the Sasquatch has more ties to maybe a natural world. Maybe. Maybe. But the
Yes,
Dogman doesn't.
yes. I agree.
There's something more
wholeheartedly.
monstrous about the Dogman to me.
There's something there that almost, and there was, and I'll just mention this, there was one encounter story I did. The guy did not want to be on this eyewitness. He's since come out and we know his name, and he's been to a couple conferences, but I did the original encounter story on it and I narrated it, but I have the raw audio when I first interviewed him. And I never followed up, and I tried to later, and that's a key component, following up with a lot of these eyewitnesses.
It is,
I
yeah.
I don't like one and done. But anyway, he said, Lance, he saw me at a conference. He said, I got to tell you what happened to the second part. I said, okay. So we went off to a corner, and he said, a few weeks later, after, he goes, I drive a truck. I got pulled over. Two guys came up. I thought they were going to look at my load. I had my list of things that I'm carrying, I'm just going to weigh and go and get to the next town. These guys came up and they basically immediately, they were dressed in like military type of t-shirt fatigues. There was two of them, big guys, came in a regular car, like a Crown Victoria. And they said, where is it? And he's like, where's what? And he said, where's the gun? You killed one of our assets. What happened is that when he was up in Michigan, windows were down. The semi truck was broken down. He was working on air brakes. He was going up a hill. The windows were down, and he caught something on the periphery. And here is this dogman's head creature bent down, running alongside, sticking its head in his window. And he was like, what's going on? He's trying to shift, going up a hill. So it's going slow, of course, trying to shift a semi going uphill. Out of instinct, about the second or third time this thing stuck its head in his cab, he pulled a firearm, shot it. It saw that he pulled the firearm, and its eyes got big as saucers. He shot it, and he saw it roll on the side mirror of the passenger side. And he said, Lance, it was as big as a horse. It had to go 1,200 pounds. This guy is the most sane, credible, down-to-earth, quiet individuals you would ever meet. He's former military. He said, it's changed my life. But what's interesting is the second part. When he was stopped, they said, you shot one of our assets. That's when it changed for me, thinking, are these manufactured? What do they know that we don't know?
Right. And it's interesting you brought that story up, Lance, because that one stands out to me as one of the best ones I've heard in your community and amongst your videos. Okay. I think it's just the sheer terror of something like that, because you're driving alone and this thing is huge. He said it was compared to running like a horse on two legs. That's how the sheer size of it. And a lot of people who have talked about the Dogman phenomena have said that seems ridiculous. There's no possible way they could be 10 feet. There's nothing like that. Not even 9. I beg to differ. If this thing is being manufactured, is being created somewhere, they could be any size they want it to be, because they almost represent to me a lineage of that Nephilim, the Nephilim beings. Okay. Why you would want to create something like that? It's funny because there's always a genetic splicing. If these beings are from another world or another planet, why are they constantly looking like us? Why do they have human attributes? It's almost as if they're mocking the creator, because they got to create their own thing. Yeah.
And when I first did the interview with him, he actually interviewed me 3 or 4 times before he told me the story. He wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to poke fun at his story, that I was serious about listening. And so his sister was the one that called me and said, you have to talk to my brother. He saw something that something happened, and he needs to talk to somebody. So that's what happened there. Second of all, in 2016, that was an interesting year around Tulsa. I don't know what happened elsewhere, but in 2016, I call it a rash of calls on this Dogman creature. I had calls in Tulsa County. I had calls in the surrounding communities around here. We have little communities that are anywhere from 10,000 to 35,000 people. We had communities north of Tulsa, west, south, east. We had where I live right now, there was sightings out here near Cleveland, Manford, Terrellton, and then there was the Sky Creek Turnpike right off the highway, and in Tulsa County
Yeah.
proper near the airport, there was a rash of sightings in 2016. Now, what significance that holds, I'm not sure.
Yeah. I
I don't
wonder.
I don't know if this is cyclic in nature. I don't know, but that was a year that there was so many sightings around here.
It's interesting when you mention years because I always go back to the 1970s of some very hot phenomena around the world involving cryptids of all kinds. It was just a hot decade for these monsters. It's like, what happened? A wormhole?
I just, tell people, listen, they exist. We're still trying to understand them. I'm sorry that you had encountered it. I know it was terrifying. I can't even imagine, but you just try to have, and I try to help them cope. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist, but because of my background, I know talk therapy works. And the more they talk about it
Yes, it
and
does.
realize they're not alone, they're not crazy, that it's okay to talk about it. But, even Jordan Peterson, kind of a thinker of our time, even says, be careful who you share news with. So I think it's okay to share people with news with you, with me, with others that have had experiences and are used to communicating with people that have seen these creatures.
When people say, hey, it can't be over 600 pounds, are they referring possibly to the fact that we have prints of these creatures, which we do? I don't know how many prints there are out there. Maybe you have some of your own that you've casted, but maybe just the impression alone can tell you a lot about how much this creature can weigh. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
But I do think that there is a way that you can determine the weight. I mean, based on the size. I mean, the prints look more, it varies a little bit, but the ones that I have casted are in Western Oklahoma, and it was in sand, which is a really hard because you don't get really good marcated prints. But the second, third, fourth, and fifth digit of a canine is what we've got. And usually canines will leave a claw. They'll have a claw print as well. Whereas your
Yeah.
felines, your bobcat, your mountain lions don't have claw prints. And then, of course, you have a metatarsal pad that's like a triangle. But it's just, instead of, like, my dog is about 110 pounds and it's like this, these are prints that are out here like this. And
Big.
so they're huge. They're so huge that your first inclination is to go, oh, someone's playing with me. That's not real. You talk
Yeah.
yourself out of what you're seeing, which Wiley Dave, my buddy, did. He talked himself out of, that can't be real. Someone's playing a joke, and he's looking around until
Yeah.
he saw what made the prints.
It makes me think of some of the things that are happening around here. Being in Oregon, you wouldn't expect to see something out of the norm, but things are happening. I think when you become more vigilant and you're constantly keeping your eyes on the sky, like I do for the things I look for, something's definitely happening around here now. I've never seen so much activity with drones, and you mentioned silent helicopters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you can hear them, but there's no light.
Right.
I'm seeing an abundance of them in my area. Is that Big Brother? I don't know, but I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because that's what I'm meant to do.
Absolutely.
It was something that might help you, though, Lance. If something you want to consider, I started doing a Google Earth map of the pterosaur sightings, and it's only available to me right now. I'm working on making it available to those who have seen one, not just anybody. So that might be something you would want to consider because you can add in so many details.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. You can add in artwork. You can add in information, links to like your shows or to your books where they can actually purchase the book or whatever. But it's something to consider if you want to go down that path.
That's a great idea. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's what you find. What's very interesting is when you have an encounter, everybody, of course, there's a lot of emotions that go through. It's kind of like feeling your emotions with a fire hose. It just comes at you all at once. You're scared, you're frustrated,
It does.
you're mystified, and all these things. And then as time takes a hold, you start becoming more inquisitive, and then you become obsessed. A lot of people become obsessed, and they want to learn more. Give me more. Give me more. And so, has other people seen these things? If so, where? What do they eat? How big do they get? And so all these natural questions come about because, we're wired for solutions. We want answers. And that's just kind of how we're
Yeah.
geared as humans. But yeah, that's a great idea. I may look into that.
But I know I've kept you for a long time, sir. But before I let you go, what new developments can you share? Is there anything that's changing on this front involving this creature, or something that would, help the cause?
I would like to study the anatomy. And I know when I say that, a lot of people, and I'm sure you've heard this, well, I'm going to go get one, I'm going to harvest one, and I'm going to take it down to Walmart, and I'm going to, get me $1 million and all this. And I'm like, first of all, that is not going to happen. I can assure you, not in the manner that you want. And second of all, it's going to land you in a lot of trouble. And I understand the premise of what you're saying, and I get it. But the problem is that it's not that easy. Remember, I just said there was a group that we don't know who they are.
Right.
I just touched on it. And this is kind of one of the things that I give conferences on about this group, this, if you will, this esoteric, unknown group that does not identify itself, is that they can make your life a living hell. They're not your friend. I have eyewitnesses that have had their bank accounts and savings accounts frozen.
I remember. Yeah.
And you think, oh, that's not possible. It happened. And it's happened a lot. And it's scary. These people, if you can't pay your bills, what do you do next? Well, you stop chattering about what you saw, don't you? Now you've got to worry. You've got other worries over here now. You got to worry about how am I going to pay my home, my car, my electric. So that's intentional. That is a tactic that they use. Now it gets back to the question: why are there so much importance on this Dogman creature as well as other creatures? What is the importance? What do they know that we don't? That's the question I want to know. But I can speculate.
$1 million.
I can go. Does it validate the Christian doctrine? Possibly. Are they using him for a lab experiment as super soldier? Don't know, but kind of makes sense. Have they been responsible for human abductions? Now that's another subject. If you want to get into David Paulides missing 411 books.
Yeah, 411, yeah.
And what other things could we logically come up with that would make sense? So that's the premise I use, that I think it could be a little bit of all of them and maybe some things.
Yeah.
And the other aspect too, if anyone at a state or a federal level recognized that they do exist, that would open Pandora's box on now, wait a minute, you've known about these creatures and you said nothing? Are they responsible for abductions? How many lands would be closed and how many billions and trillions of dollars would be lost in camping, recreating, hunting, national parks, state
A lot of
parks?
ramifications, isn't there?
There is, and it goes on and on and on. And it's just it opens up this huge mystery that the world is more mysterious than what we thought, and it's bigger than what we thought, and what we used to think was just in the movies is actually real.
Yeah. And they tell you there's no such thing as monsters, but guess what? There are. No doubt about it.
And that's why we changed our name.
Lastly, yeah, that pretty much sums it up for me. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your time and appreciate your research. It's great stuff. And it's been a place for people to go to as an outlet where they can feel that they can come forward without the scorn. And that's what we all need. We need places and we need outlets where people can go to. And I know that we have ours. Lance has his. And I remember when it was called Cryptid Brothers Investigations. Now it's called Monster 911. I like that name. Right to the punchline. Monster 911.
That's right.
Lance, it's been a pleasure to have you along. I appreciate all your research. Thank you so much for all that you've done and a credibility to this field. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate you, your show, and I just look forward for people, digging in themselves and what is out there. I think it would surprise them.
For every encounter, there is a mystery. And for every mystery, there's someone somewhere who holds that missing clue. Perhaps that someone is watching. Perhaps that someone is you. Join us again next time as we dive deeper into the realm of the unknown. Until then, seek the truth.